Hello, you're listening to Linguistically Aware. My name is Dusan, and I'm the host of this wonderful podcast. Today, I sat down with Dr. Stephen Winters, and we talked about the ways human voices are produced and perceived, what voice qualities there are, and why Adele should have a voice she had despite losing a lot of weight. We debunked some myths, and we chatted about our passion for phonetics, a branch of linguistics that studies the way speech is produced and perceived. Dr. Stephen Winters is an assistant professor of linguistics at the University of Calgary, where he teaches linguistic courses such as phonetics, quantitative methods in linguistics, varieties of English, and other. Steve is also my supervisor, a role model, and a person I learned a lot from over the past 4 years, and I hope that you will learn a tiny fraction of it as well in the next 2 episodes. Yes, that's right, you heard it well. In the next 2 episodes, you will listen to my conversation with Dr. Stephen Winters about the topic extremely dear to us, and that is phonetics. Before you tune in to our conversation and before you listen to some awesome music that I'm going to play today for you, it is essential to acknowledge that this is CJSW 90.9 FM radio station broadcasting on the traditional territories of all the people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 of Southern Alberta. First of all, thank you for coming. Thank you for being here.
Sure, I'm happy to be here.
I'm very glad that we are in studio. Finally, after so many years, it feels like it's been years, and I'm glad that we are able to record properly this time. So I want to ask you first of all about your research. That's I think the most important part. Yeah, thank you for coming, and let's start with that. What is your research about?
Yeah, my research is, I think of myself as a phonetician, but my research is mostly focused on speech perception. So there's kind of multiple threads I could tell you about, but a lot of my research is focused on a theory of speech perception known as the exemplar theory of speech perception, which in the most general sense, it says that you store in memory every experience you have of speech, and you link up those memories with specific speech categories, and you use those memories to interpret new experiences by basically categorizing new experiences you have on the basis of their similarity to your stored memories. So the kind of different lines I've taken with that, one interesting path of research was about talker identification. So one of the predictions that is made by the exemplar theory of speech perception is that you don't toss aside any information, especially if it's useful to interpreting speech. And it turns out that if you're familiar with a speaker's voice, if you know what they sound like, it's a lot easier for you to understand what they're saying than if you're listening to somebody who's unfamiliar. So there's a lot of sort of work on the interaction between talker identification and speech recognition. And so one of the first, research studies that I did post getting my PhD, where I did something else, was to look at whether people can identify the same speaker across languages. And at that particular time, we looked at people speaking German and English, which were relatively similar languages, but people can't always make the transfer across the 2 languages. So what you do is you train listeners to identify a speaker, and there's different training paradigms. We were using a training paradigm where they listen to people saying one word at a time, which makes it harder to train them up. So they would do multiple training sessions over a period of, I think to start we were doing 5 days, which is quite a lot of training. And then at the end, you switch the language on them. So you hear somebody speaking German, and then the last day they speak English, and can you still identify the same speaker? And it turns out there's
and it's the same voice, right?
Yeah. So the same set of voices, basically, because you have to, you train them on multiple voices at the start, and then you learn them by name, and then you find out what they sound like in a different language, right?
So they associated the voice with the name, right?
Yeah, okay. Right. Yeah, and there's different ways to do that too. We just had like a name in a specific color. Like it could have had like an avatar or something like that. But it winds up being easier to transfer to your native language. Like if you're an English speaker and you hear somebody speaking German, then you go to English, that's a little easier than going from English, all of a sudden German, where like you don't have the additional linguistic cues. So there's kind of an interaction between language and talker voice identity there, I guess you could say. And there's also sort of what they call a familiar talker advantage there's a familiar talker advantage like in your own native language, but also just listening to different voices in your native language, you can distinguish them more clearly than if you're listening to speakers in a language that you don't know. I don't know if you've had that sort of experience. You're a Serbian speaker in an English-speaking environment, and as an L2, you're a very proficient English speaker, but I don't know if you've had any difficulties either understanding people that you don't know or identifying voices if you're like talking on the phone or something like that.
That's an interesting question. I don't recall having those kind of difficulties. Maybe just a language barrier sometimes, even though I'm proficient. Sometimes some people would, for example, let's say mumble the words, or at least it seemed to be that they would do that. But I did not have problems with voices or with any kind of that talker identification.
Yeah.
Even though I am not a native speaker.
Yeah, well, it probably doesn't come up as much as I guess it used to. Like if you get a phone call, you normally get identified, like the information about who's calling you with a cell phone nowadays. So you don't just pick up the phone and have no clue. But my wife has mentioned on a personal level that she, like the way I talk, she thinks I mumble all the time, which is, I think, my Midwestern accent. But yeah.
There is one of our colleagues and your student as well. I won't mention his name. That we think that I think sometimes he's not really understandable, intelligible.
Okay.
So to say.
Well,
that happens, right?
Certain speakers are more intelligible than others, and that's part of why it helps to learn what their voice sounds like in order to understand what they're saying, right? So, yeah.
So, with respect to the research, what was the finding in the end? I'm curious to know.
Well, I mean, it's kind of a question of whether you are. The basic finding is that you can transfer some information across languages, but some gets lost. So, like from the exemplar point of view, the idea is that you store everything in memory, right? But if there's something that gets lost in that sort of translation, like it seems like you're not storing that information in memory, or you're like not making the match when you're trying to like interpret new experiences with your old memories, right? So like in another, this is work that I never wound up publishing, but I'm hoping to get to now that I'm going on sabbatical next semester. But another study I did didn't look across languages, but looked across voice qualities. So it was kind of a fun little experiment to set up, but I had people speaking in different voice qualities, and I would have listeners trained up on identifying their voices when they're using different specific voice qualities. And then I could see if they would transfer that to a new voice quality. So if people out there listening don't know what a voice quality is, there's kind of three main voice qualities. Right now I'm speaking in what's called modal voice, which is kind of the moderate in the middle, like consistent voicing. And then, so these describe, when I say voice quality, it describes what's happening with your vocal folds when you speak. And there's another voice quality, which has become somewhat famous, I guess, or modish in the modern world of phonetics, but it's called creaky voice. And creaky voice sounds more like this. So in that case, your vocal folds are opening up sporadically and not consistently like they do when you're speaking modal voice. A third one is breathy voice, which sounds like this, a little breathy, where you have more kind of turbulence coming up through your vocal folds and not closing completely. So that's three versions of me, right? Like breathy, modal, and creaky, right? So it's same me, like, but do you identify that as the same voice, right? And that was, so exemplar theory says you should store that information, right? And then that would actually, if your memories are kind of like overly specific, if you're overly attuned to like a certain voice quality. Like if you just hear me speaking creaky voice all the time, it might be harder to identify me speaking modal voice like that. And that's generally what you find out to be true when you make that switch, that people don't make that sort of transfer. But the other question is whether it helps them with understanding what that person is saying. If you learn to listen to what a person is saying in modal voice all the time, then all of a sudden they start speaking creaky voice. You don't get that sort of familiar talker benefit to understanding the words that they're saying, if that makes any sense.
No, it does. There's something I've been meaning to ask you later, but we can answer it right now. What are the attitudes towards different voice qualities?
In terms of listener attitudes towards creaky voice, that's kind of been the interesting question a lot of people have addressed and why it's been a hot topic of study over the past decade or so. But creaky voice, that voice quality has been adopted more, like there's some sketchy data on this, but they think it's being used more by young women than it used to be. Or at least it's been noticed as being a prominent part of young women's speech nowadays. In the old days, like a generation or two ago, people thought a creaky voice is more of a masculine voice quality, or at least the phoneticians thought that men used it more often. So, why are young women speaking with that voice quality more often? So it turns out when you play samples of people using creaky voice to listeners, they generally find it an unattractive voice quality. Normally, if people are making judgments about whether it sounds feminine or masculine, they judge it to be more masculine sounding voice quality. So when it's paired with female speech, they find it kind of doubly unattractive for that reason, which is a bit funny because young women are using it more often, but we know when language changes, often young women are on the forefront of that change. So possibly the world will look different in a generation. People will find it less attractive. Who knows? But for right now, that's what the data show us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's called vocal fry, right?
Yeah, that's a funny story too. And that's actually, I can link that up with a personal story as well. So it's sometimes called glottal fry or vocal fry, which are terms used more often in the speech language pathology literature. Mm-hmm. So for many years, for decades really, speech pathologists who make a living trying to solve speech problems thought that creaky voice was a problem, and that if you use too much creaky voice, it would damage your vocal folds. So a term like vocal fry or glottal fry makes it sound like you're frying your vocal folds, and you're making just like a piece of steak down there or something, right? But there's no evidence that that's the case. That if you use creaky voice, it causes any damage to your vocal folds. It's just a natural sort of voice quality variation that you can use within the parameters of like healthy speaking. But people in the old days used to be actively discouraged from using this voice quality. So it's funny, there's a study from about 2005 where when people were starting to pick up on the fact that young women were using this voice quality more often, some speech pathologists just like recorded their incoming class. So this is a program, like an MA program or something somewhere in the States that had, about 20 new students coming into their MA speech pathology program. And they recorded their students speaking, and they found that like 19 out of 20 were using like more creaky voice than would be recommended by the speech pathologist. And so it's like, okay, something's going on. It's like a trend, obviously. And at that time, in that article, they were still like, well, this is bad, so somehow we got to stop this. And in fact, my sister studied to become an elementary education teacher, and she graduated from college in 1994. And then there's a lot of sort of steps you have to go through to become a teacher, to be, qualified as a teacher in the U.S. And
certified, right?
Certified, that's the word I was looking for, the certification process. Yeah. But one of those was they listened to her speak, and they said, you're using too much creaky voice, or they call it glottal fry. And so you have to go see a speech pathologist to correct that. And so what they recommended was basically speaking with a higher fundamental frequency, F0. So speaking with a higher voice like this, and that might induce less creaky voice perhaps. Yeah. But she didn't like that. And she just kind of wound up going a different direction altogether. Yeah. But it was a shame because she was an excellent student, a very motivated teacher, but kind of got denied the opportunity to do what she wanted to do with life because of some misconceptions about how the human voice works, right?
Yeah, and has this changed? I mean, the attitude towards people who speak with creaky voice.
That I don't know. I don't know if the authorities have changed their attitudes. They don't tend to do that too often. I guess that's one place where we could go out and do some linguistics activism, I suppose.
Yeah.
But like I said, when you just ask people how they feel about this voice quality, you generally don't get positive responses. Mm-hmm. In addition to people thinking it's a unattractive voice quality, they also think it's somebody who's not super serious not. That's funny. When we do our own the data I've collected in my own lab suggests that some people interpret it as an authoritative voice quality, perhaps because it's less low F0, right? So if you speak with a low voice, you might sound like a more powerful, more serious person. But in combination with young female voice, that's often it's kind of counterindicated, basically.
Yeah, but I guess it's only for males, or at least predominantly for males.
Yeah, so gender does definitely factor into this. Yeah. You get different results. So I mentioned the other voice quality option being breathy voice. Yeah. So breathy voice like this is considered, when you ask people, they say that sounds unattractive for a male, but it will sound attractive for a female. So you get that counterbalancing of breathy and creaky voice that way.
Yeah, I guess we're touching upon linguistics there, but we are entering some other realms, such as prejudice and social roles that genders play, I guess.
Yeah. Well, language is everywhere, Dusan. It's part of every sort of human endeavor. So
that's why we're recording this.
Right.
Yeah.
Gold walls that I built for you just to dig me out with silver spoons. No, I didn't see it coming. Oh. Gold walls that I'm stuck inside. I guess beauty sees what I can't find. I didn't. Oh, I didn't see it coming. Well, I got your code and I got your message. I want you to know that you are the love of my life. The love of my life. You never leave when the song is over. You ride or die till the end. You're the love of my life. You're the love of my life. My life. Oh. Old walls that I built for you just to dig me out with silver spoons. No, I didn't see it coming. Oh. Old walls that I'm stuck inside. I guess beauty sees what I can't find. I didn't. Oh, I didn't see it coming. Well, I got your code and I got your message. I want you to know that you are the love of my life. The love of my life. You never leave when the song is over. You ride or die till the end. You're the love of my life. You're the love of my life. My life. Oh.
You mentioned speech pathologists. Speech pathologists take your class. Most of the students, at least, who want to go further into speech pathology, they take your Linguistics 341, which is phonetics, introduction to phonetics, at least, and maybe some take your advanced phonetics course. Why is that so? Why are they interested in the course itself?
I think,
besides being a requirement?
yeah, I mean, you kind of have to ask them why they'd be interested in the course aside from the requirement. It's kind of just the way the academic culture is set up in Canada. So, so I come from the U.S. originally, and there's a clear split between speech and hearing sciences programs and linguistics programs. So if somebody in the U.S. wants to become a speech language pathologist, they would go through speech and hearing sciences, and they probably wouldn't take many linguistics classes at all, maybe phonetics. I mean, I'd recommend that they do take phonetics, actually, but I'm in Canada, and at the undergrad level here, we don't have a speech and hearing sciences program. So those students want to generally go through linguistics or maybe psychology, something like that. So yeah, the speech and hearing sciences, the dedicated programs emerge at the graduate level, and they're limited in number, so it's a very competitive field. Yeah. So, well, I mean, I guess I would say in the U.S. you get more of a clear split between the language nerds who are just the linguistics majors, and you know those people well, right? And then the people who want to be like speech pathologists, who are sort of more organized and perhaps a little more conventional, I would say, in the other programs. But in our programs here in Canada, there's a mix, right? So, right. And, you know, you have to sort of attune a course like phonetics to balance out both people's interests, basically, right? Yeah. So I do a little more, I guess, physiological specifics for the classes up here than I did back in the U.S., but there's also maybe more look at these phonological patterns in sound that like a speech and hearing science major would be less interested in, perhaps, than a linguistics major up here. But, you know, they're all together, and I think that's good for us. It kind of gives it, well, I mean, it gives us a bigger pool of students to work from, and then also like diverse interests that we can all kind of learn from each other.
Sure. And I think that's great that they are taking this course. Seeing the course is great, for sure. And there is audiology, I think, or at least some programs in audiology here at University of Calgary.
I don't know that for sure. I just know a couple of my students have gone on to be audiologists, and they have reported that they enjoy that career path at the end of the day. That's all I can say about that. So
nice. I was wondering whether they do, but but it's good. So why do we all have, and I think the public or the general public who are maybe listening to this does not know that we all have specific types of voice, right? Or quality of voice.
Yeah.
Why is that so?
You know, another thing when I was a kid is they used to talk about voice prints or like voice print technology. That, you know, if the FBI recorded your voice over a phone call or something, they could match it up and figure out who you were. You know, and like, so number one, I know what they were referring to when they were talking about voice prints. We call them spectrograms now. And I think with 1980s technology, it would have been very difficult to do any of that sort of matching that they're talking about. In the modern day, like, technology has improved quite a bit. And if they have a pre-existing sample, like an exemplar of your voice, it would become a lot easier to sort of make that match. But you've seen a lot of spectrograms in my classes, and, you know, there's a lot of structure in there, and they're not easy to interpret. So basically, a spectrogram is a representation of how the different energies of different frequencies change over time when you're speaking. And there's a lot of complex information in there. And we take a couple semesters really in phonetics to learn the basics of how to interpret that. But one of the big sort of structures that's there, or pairing of structures, I guess you could say, is that there are source features in your voice, which is what your vocal folds are doing. And then there are also filter features, which is what you're doing with everything above your vocal folds from your throat on up. And so just like in terms of biological parameters, some people have longer or thicker vocal folds than others, and then some people have longer vocal tracts than others. And so if you have, say, longer or thicker vocal folds, you'll tend to speak with a lower voice, like a lower fundamental frequency, a lower pitch of your voice. And then that's separate, though, from what's going on with your vocal tract. If you have a longer vocal tract, you will have lower frequency resonances in your voice. And so when people say, oh, he's speaking with a low voice, it's like not clear. Normally that means the pitch of his voice is going down and the pitch of her voice is going down. but it could have something to do with like the vocal tract length and the formant frequencies of the resonant frequencies of your voice. So that's the funny thing about Julia Child, who you mentioned twice, and hopefully your listeners know who Julia Child was. If they never watched the show, there's a movie about her life they could always check out. But she was a woman with a distinctive voice because she had a high F0. She spoke with a high-pitched voice, but she had a long vocal tract because she was 6'2", I believe, which is fairly tall for a woman. And it's almost as tall as me. So it's
and that's tall.
I can't really imitate it, right? Because it's a distinctive voice. Not everybody has a voice that distinctive, but it's a bit like talking if I speak with a high F0, but I don't sound like Julia Child at all. She was also, I think, from the Massachusetts area. So, that's another way you could possibly identify her voice, is just by sort of dialectal features in her phonology, right? A certain pattern in her sounds. There's a lot of different ways people can sound distinct, or have distinctive sounding voices. And talking about the phonetic side, or just like what are the results of the sort of biological infrastructure you're given, is just one part of the equation. Like another example is that I'm just thinking about was Tom Waits. If you know what he sounds like, people often describe him.
At
this point you can maybe splice in a Tom Waits song or something at the end. But
if we have a copyright.
Right.
Well,
that's the funny thing, right? Is that he tried to copyright his voice. So he has what most people describe as a very gravelly sounding voice. And somebody somewhere was trying to like kind of imitate Tom Waits' sound. And he was like, you can't do that. That's my whole bag. So if you're going to do that, you have to like respect the copyright of my distinctive voice.
So he had the voice print basically, which is sort of a copyright document.
Well, that kind of goes back to the exemplar theory again as well. Like another part of the theory is that there's no one thing which makes a distinctive thing distinctive, right? It's like you look at all the examples of that in the world, and sort of over the general pattern, you can get a sense of like this group of things is separate from something else. So it's not necessarily your vocal fold length. It's not your vocal tract length. It's not, are you dropping your R's or whatever like that. It's the whole thing wrapped up as one, kind of makes your voice, right?
That was a phenomenal Dr. Stephen Winters. If you want to listen to the upcoming episodes of Linguistically Aware, make sure to stay tuned to CJSW 90.9 FM radio station. If you want to find out more about Calgary linguistics, visit calgarylinguistics.ca. If you want to find out more about myself, visit my homepage, DUSANNIKOLIC. If you want to find out more about Dr. Winters, you can check out ufclinguistics.org. Thank you for listening, and please don't change the station. You're in the right place.